Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tech Talk, a podcast where Amit and I talk about various technology related topics. Today's topic is biometrics. It's a very interesting topic Amit has come up with, and we were talking about it earlier as well. And I found it really, really helpful for our audience to be aware of and all the different things that can be considered as biometrics. As soon as we hear biometrics, we might think of the two most commonly known ones like fingerprint and retina scan. But there are so many other facets of biometrics that we're going to talk about today. I mean, just from the name, if we think about anything biological, metric of anything biological, and we're using it to identify, so it usually applied on humans. So, all our biological markers from retina to odor to voice to fingerprint, all of these things, and that's just the source of information. How it's processed and how it's used. There could be also differences on that factor as well. So based on that, biometrics is actually quite a large field, and there's so many things to know about. And it's also good to know about in terms of to be aware of all the technological advancements that are going on and how it's being used for you, against you, and in the background of you without you knowing. So various government organizations and other organizations might use your biometric information in a way that you would like for convenience, or you may not like. So there are reasons to know about all the things that are going on out there, and that's one of the reasons that we thought you guys would really be helped being aware of it. Thank you, Amit, for coming up with this topic. I am actually, less knowledgeable. I only know the very surface level knowledge, but I'm quite excited to discuss all of these things with you. So, what's your thought on biometrics, Amit?
So thanks so much again, Rinat, for that great introduction. I think you've summarized quite a lot, and I think that gives the gist to the audience. But I just wanted to say we have biometrics, biological measurements, but why are we measuring it in the first place? What's the need to measure it? I mean, are we doing it for login? So we are. Are we doing it to authorize someone or authenticate someone or allow someone access to something? And how and why can't we use anything else? Why biological markers are being used or biological measurements are being used? So I think that's the most important question. In technology today, we use biometrics very casually, and we don't think about it quite a lot. But biometrics are there to actually make give access to programs or to websites or to government data like passport, visa, etc. Easily. And you don't have to carry anything or remember anything. It's just you going physically somewhere using your fingerprints, using your eyes or your facial features or your voice, and you can quickly authenticate or authorize that yes, I am the person whom I'm saying, and there is no duplicate version of me or a clone of me, and you can please provide me access. So I think that's very important to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And an interesting thing to think about is that biometrics actually has been around for a really a long, long time than we what might think. Now with technological advancement and integration with your phone and everything, we're thinking it's a new technology. But actually, even before these digital age, when you were, say, for example, you wanted to own a will, but in early 1900s or even 1800s, not everyone knew how to read and write or have a signature. So fingerprint was one of the ways to actually the signature replaced fingerprint. So before
Yes.
you had signature, you had fingerprint to identify someone and identify someone with certainty that this fingerprint belongs to this person. And then, with the advent of technology like pens and paper, and as people got more educated and they had their signature, then it eventually replaced with with a pen, a signature by pen. So yeah, fingerprint has been around, and that's one of the biological markers that we measure to identify. I think, as you were saying, Amit, one of the reason why this became more and more popular nowadays is the need to identify someone. In digital world, we all have our presence, digital presence. We have in social media or wherever our different accounts, and we need to be able to identify someone because we don't know if the person they're saying they are actually that person. So biometric is a really good way to identify, more of a certain way to identify, because a lot of your login information, say for example, you identify yourself digitally with your email address and password, as you sign in, but that can be hacked, or that information, you might inadvertently pass around to your friends and family. But in situations where the authorities or you do not want in any way, for anyone, even your close friends and family, to identify as yourself. For example, in passport situation, you might want it, but the government or authorities would not want anyone else to represent you. So in these scenarios, biometrics are quite helpful and quite a good solution to this problem. As a result of because there is this technological need, or this business need, that's why there were a lot more research to find out how to identify someone with certainty. Now, for example, there is a spectrum of different biological markers being giving you the different level of certainty. So for example, DNA evidence is like at one of the ones that are in the top of the spectrum, the way
Yes.
you can be like 99.99% certain that this DNA belongs to this person. There is a very, very little chance that there could be a duplicate, or there could be an error. Whereas, if you were just facial recognition, that could probably be 96 or 97% accurate. And there is a spectrum of that. And based on the level of, the value of thing that you're protecting, you could use different types of these biometrics. That's why governments usually use fingerprint and I think what else do governments use? I can only remember fingerprints right now. I mean, what?
So it's not just fingerprints. They take a photograph of you, right?
Yeah,
And
of course.
so whenever you go at airports, they'll ask you to point your face at a camera, and so this is not for people who have passports that you can just scan at a gate and then go through the airport security, oh sorry, airport borders or the immigration. So these are people who have visas, and for those visas, the a person physically scans the visa, ask you to use some of your fingers, a thumb or an index finger, to take the fingerprint to match it with the data that they have in their database. And they also try to they ask you to face a camera so that they can take a picture and they can verify that whether this it's the same person as it's there in their records. So yes, biometrics that way, I mean, it's very crucial for governments so that people cannot fake identities. And as you rightly mentioned, it's all about verification of identities and making sure that the right person is getting the right access, so access to country, access to borders, access to any security related. In
Information.
defense, you'll have a lot of areas where you deal with confidential information, and in those cases you cannot just share those confidential information to anyone. So there might be secret projects. I mean, we see it in a lot of Hollywood films, and I'm pretty sure that that's something real. So I'm guessing what happens is that there are people who are given certain levels of access, and those access are sometimes in a security card and merged with an additional biomarker, say your fingerprints or your retina scan or your facial recognition. So yeah, so those are still quite important. I mean, one of the things that I mean you mentioned about earlier is that we have been using the fingerprints for a very long time, and even when the technology was not there, and we were using our thumbprint to identify people. But of course, that can be easily replicable, as we have seen in a lot of movies. You take the fingerprint off from a glass or something, and then you create a wax out of it, and then you try to replicate that. But of course, it's movies. I'm sure there might be some real basis to it. And then moving on, we have our handwriting. So everyone has a unique style of writing, even holding a pen. So every person has a unique style of holding the pen. Some hold it. Some hold it like this, some hold it like this. So I mean, there are various ways, and some hold it in their right hand, some hold it in their left hand. So there are different ways in which people hold their pen, and some people prefer writing using a ball pen, some people prefer writing using an ink pen, etc., etc. And the way, so some people write legible words, cursive writing. Some people just write different alphabets, and you and they just give some spaces in between. So every person is unique, and the signature becomes a kind of a biological marker, because a signature is basically representing the motion of your hand on a piece of paper using the pen. And that is, I think, quite useful. And over a period of time, we have then adapted these things to different types of biological measurements. So we initially started, I mean, and most of us now have mobile phones. So when we started using mobile phones, one of the first things we wanted to do was lock the phone. So there was always a password or a pin or some kind of a shape that you could draw, and that would unlock your phone, or you could press a button to unlock it. But it was not very secure. You can easily guess passwords if you have written it down, or if you forget it, it's very easy. But then the phones came with fingerprint scanners. So those fingerprint scanners, when they came, they used to scan first the thumb or the finger that's most comfortable for you to open a phone, and then they would use that fingerprint to verify every time you try to unlock it. And that has become pretty good in itself. And then we moved on to facial recognition. So Apple started with facial recognition, and it is one of the best facial recognition systems in the world on iPhones. And they try to take pictures of your face from various angles under different lighting conditions, even sometimes where you are having a beard, just to make sure that the right person is getting access to the right smartphone. So yeah, I think if you just look at smartphones, we have moved on from passwords to fingerprints to facial recognition.
Absolutely, and that's a good example of using biometrics, because your phone, the more with time, as we're getting more technology into our phones are becoming really valuable. The information stored in our phone are becoming really valuable.
Yes.
Your bank, you might have an app for your bank, your other financial accounts, etc., as well as your other, I don't know, personal diaries and notes and so many
Shopping
things.
accounts, wallets, banks, I mean, there are many other apps that you use, travel, for which you would have certain cards linked to. So you don't want the phone to land in someone's hand, and then they ordering something on your behalf, or buying a ticket on your behalf, or using your identity, and then use that.
Yeah, and yeah, all of this information can be used to get your identity and use it for later for other malicious purposes. So the access to your phone has become more and more important over time, and that's why in the very early days there was no concept of protection of your phone, but then slowly it came with PIN numbers and other password related ways to protect it. And then the more and more it became a privacy situation, and the phone started belong to just one person. Before, there were times when a few people, among friends or family, would use one mobile phone as well. But nowadays, mobile phone is just attached to this one person, and using that biometrics, you can achieve that level of privacy. And because it's quite serious amount of information, you need that kind of that level of certainty or that level of protection, and that's why biometrics has gone really well with the protection of your phone.
Yeah, and I mean in phone and now even in laptops you have a fingerprint scanner, so you can actually unlock your laptop with the fingerprint, and now they also have the same technology of facial recognition, so you can actually unlock your laptop using facial recognition. Most of the Microsoft laptops they now have this option. I'm not sure about the iOS options, but sorry, the Mac OS options, but on Windows laptops, you do have an option where you can unlock your laptop using the facial recognition apart from your fingerprints. So I think those are the two main things that we are most comfortable with. I mean, even if you look at facial recognition, when you look at your face, you have so many things on your face. You have your eyes, you have your nose, you have your mouth, and you have your cheeks, you have your hairs on your head. So there are a lot of other things that can be used as a biological marker. And sometimes what the people do is they look at the retina of your in your eyes to actually identify the identity of a person. And that's of course in I'm guessing that's used in more secure sites rather than on day-to-day basis at in your laptop or in your mobile phone. So those are at a very used at a very secure site. Then you have this DNA, and you have your blood that's inside your body. And when is it actually used? So you might have heard about a lot of these crimes that happen, and then there is investigations happening about who committed the crime, or there might be a rape that has happened and no one is able to identify who has done the rape, or identify who's the biological father of the child, and you want to quickly identify who the person is. So there are biological markers, and those biological markers are used to identify who the culprit was. So they collect the biometrics from a lot of criminals, and they put into a database, and same with a lot of people, and they put it in the hospital database. And what's done is that in case a crime is conducted, they collect the DNA from the samples, and they try to match it with the database that they already have to see if it is the crime is committed by a known criminal, or if it's an unknown criminal, they can then see if there is a pattern of crimes done by the unknown criminals. I mean, we've seen a lot of movies, but I'm sure that this happens in reality, because you hear about so many cases being won on the biological markers. There are cases that have been reversed because there has been new evidence based on the DNA from the samples collected that have overturned old rulings, and sometimes a criminal who's not behind the bars has been put behind bars, and sometimes a person who's been proven innocent has actually been found guilty. So those things have happened. And in case of biological fathers, sometimes we are not sure who the biological father is, so DNA again comes into picture. And we all have different blood types, so it's very easy to take a blood like a prick. So you take a prick from your finger and take a small amount of blood, and using that blood, you can identify who you are. The blood types, the many other things. There was a whole company that was created, Theranos, that ultimately died. And the whole idea of that company was to provide you the biological what I mean, all the biological indicators just using a single or few drops of blood from your fingertip. And I mean, of course, it's not related to biometrics, but it's some kind of measurements using your blood. So yeah, I mean, those are some of the cases where you can use your biological markers for solving certain things, access, crime solving, finding a biological father, etc. And there are other ways in which we can use the biological markers. Sometimes the way we walk, the way we type. Uh, Not everyone uses all their fingers for typing. Some people use just few fingers. So by the way we type, we can identify who the person is. Now remember, biological markers have to be biological. It cannot be external. So it could be voice as well. So there are now a lot of softwares that try to recognize your voice and see if it's you who's speaking. But voice recognition can be easily faked because what can happen is that you can record the voice and you can use certain words and you can use that in a conversation. So a lot of AI models are now being created. If you have seen the I think the most recent Star Wars film, there was a character who had already passed away, and they used AI to, not AI, but they used uh, special effects to create the person, and they used some of the audio from the person's films to generate the audio for the new film. It's crazy what you can do actually with technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is also another thing to be mindful of. While being unaware how much information you're kind of giving away around throughout the internet. One of the interesting ways to sort of, as you mentioned, Amit, voice can be easily recreated, so it's not very secure, to secure your phone. But even fingerprints, you're thinking that okay, fingerprints is just by yourself, but while you're sleeping,
Yeah,
your
yeah, very easily.
or someone who is close to you could just put your finger next on the fingerprint scanner on your phone and can have that open. Um,
Or
another
or or you get kidnapped and or someone tries to overpower you. They use your thumb to unlock your phone and they just run away with it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many so many interesting ways this can happen, and another way is another uh, to sort of counter this problem with fingerprint. You could have facial recognition, and you could set it up so that your eyes are always have to be eyes have to be always open. Some then there's still other ways where someone can print a picture of you, but then I think in latest iPhone models, they can identify whether it's a 2D image or a.
Yes, yeah.
But then you can also be more clever and have
3D
a,
print. 3D print.
not necessarily 3D print, but have it picture printed so that you edit it in a way that once you attach it to your own face, it would look like it's the other person's face, and
Yeah, yeah,
then
yeah. The masks that
so
people
there.
use.
Mhm.
So in a lot of
Yeah.
films you see mask, right? People wearing masks. So that mask is actually what it's just what you
Mhm.
described.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are various ways, but these are some of the fun ways. Hopefully, not a lot of people are going through this length to get access to your phone. But then there are other ways that we should be aware of how we're giving out our information. Like, for example, there are, for example, we are uploading our voices to YouTube and other podcast streaming places. So our voices are very much out there. But at the same time, I remember I was working in a company where they had to enter the premises. They had a fingerprint scanner, and a few of the tech guys, they actually denied to give their fingerprint information to the company because they were securing that information, because they knows that if for whatever reason it was a startup company, if that information is somehow stolen, they're going to be vulnerable, because they can't really, I mean, that's another thing about biological markers. You can't change your biological markers,
Yeah.
so you're stuck.
Until unless you get into an accident. So suppose you lose a right limb, or your face gets burnt, or your hands get burnt, your biological markers do change. So that's
But
a thing.
in a regular scenario,
Regular scenario,
you
yes.
don't go through.
Yeah.
So you can't change it either. So once, if it somehow gets related or somehow gets wrongly marked, you have to you'll probably be harassed quite a bit, because authorities will think you're someone else, because an imposter probably used your biological markers in a malicious way. So it's important to be aware that these are information about yourselves that you can't
Yeah.
change very easily. are out there and people can be using it. I'm not saying live a very paranoid life of always being, super alert of how, it's just about some level of awareness. Like, you're not, it's not like you're always having to wear gloves or not touching, a glass or anything else, so your fingerprints can't be stolen. But, if you are in a particular premise, based on the context where you are, you might want to be a little bit secure on that one day where you can think that this might be a risky situation or some shady something, if that situation presents itself as you go on around with your life. So yeah, it's just being aware. I'm not saying that it's an everyday scenario where you have to be on full alert all the time. That would be quite a stressful way to live your life. But it's still also good to know the things that can happen. So
No,
yeah.
that's definitely true because I mean we are now giving these information for free. So we give so our passwords are actually stored on servers which are not on our machines. They are somewhere remote. So people have our passwords. Companies like Amazon, Google, they have our passwords. Microsoft, they have our passwords. Now on top of that, I whenever I scan the fingerprints, I mean I'm I'm not sure whether it's stored on my laptop locally or whether it's communicated or stored somewhere on the internet. I'm
So
guessing it's local.
well, yeah, if Samsung is telling the truth, which they should, I don't know about iPhone, but in Samsung phones, as they say, the fingerprint information is only stored locally
Yeah,
on your
yeah,
phone.
yeah. So,
And
so
yeah,
yes, so it's fingerprint phone. So you suppose you buy a new iPhone, your fingerprints are not transferred. Your data is transferred, but not your biometrics. So you'll have to scan the phone again with your fingerprint, your facial recognition, etc., so that you can try to lock your phone again with your biometrics. So I think that's again important to understand. But the government authorities like say the passport, so a lot of the passports now come with a chip, and those chip have your biometric data, and when they scan the passport at the gates, at the security gates or at the immigration, they can quickly tell whether this person is who he is or she, or whether there is a impersonation of the person. So those biometrics are now with the government, and those are actually stayed are there in a database which is owned by the government. So you have willingly given your biometrics to a government authority. Now, what if that government authority gets hacked? Your biometrics get leaked. So most of the other biometrics, say your phone, if it gets lost, fine, someone can fake it. We gave some examples, so someone might try to steal the biometrics using that way. But if a government website gets hacked, or say your medical records are very, very uh, important, and they are maintained with highest of security. But what if Amazon, Google, Facebook, they now start getting access to some of the data, not everything, and they could then create a pattern, and based on that pattern they can identify who the person is. So those information is really valuable, and we have to be very careful. So how governments use our data, the biometrics, and how companies, say the medical companies, hospitals, etc., use our biological data and store it, because anything can happen with this data, and people can then easily impersonate you. And it's very important to safeguard these data.
yeah, absolutely. And so we talked about all different kinds of biological markers there are. I mean, I don't think we talked about all different types there could be. What we talked about were the some of the most popular or most used ones. There could be many other ones as well, but yeah, the most popular ones are the ones that you will come across usually. So there are different ways. Now let's talk about how these information are being used technically in the back end. So, they, as we've seen, like, your phone keeps the fingerprint in, your fingerprint in the phone. So how are you actually getting validated? So basically, the validation, whether it's your fingerprint or not, that decision happens, or that validation happens in your phone, and then that the result or output is encrypted and then sent over the internet, and then the third party, like your bank, uh, gets that information that, yeah, this is who we think it is, and then gives you access to your
I
banking.
think that encrypted part, I'm not sure how it's sent, but say for example, it's a banking app. Say I'm using HSBC app, and I try to first log in with my username and password. So those are things that clearly identify me. In case I lose my password and someone else uses it, then it's my fault and I'll not be able to access. But in order to deal with extra security, two-factor authentication is added. So I have to add a username and a password and a token from some place like a Google Authenticator or some OTP sent over SMS, etc. So that's a two-factor authentication. Now, on top of that, so now I have to enter a username, I have to enter a password, I have to enter a OTP or a token. Now, if I don't want to use all of that, I can just use my biological marker to establish that this is me. In order for me to do that, I have to first go through the whole process of entering the username, password, and then entering the two-factor authentication code over OTP or token. And then I add my fingerprint to as an additional security. So on top of the two-factor authentication, I have another factor which is biometric. Now I add my fingerprints. The fingerprints are actually stored on the phone, and they when you store your fingerprints, they also ask. So I use a OnePlus 10 Pro, 9 Pro device, and my device asks whether anyone else stores their fingerprints or uses this device using their fingerprints. So normally, if you say yes, then it means that the fingerprints are stored and used only by you. But in case, say for example, you have a spouse and you decided that okay, you want to give her access or him access to your phone, and you decide to store their biometrics on your phone. Now their biometrics are also stored, and there are different fingerprints. So now, for some reason, if something happens, they can unlock certain apps which you thought is secured by your fingerprint, but is actually secured by their fingerprints as well, because that's part of the database. So remember, whenever we store fingerprints in the mobile phone, it's not just one fingerprint. You can add multiple fingers. You can add your index finger, your ring finger, your thumb, etc. So whichever finger is convenient. If you add one finger, it's fine. But if you add multiple fingers, then any one finger can be used to open that. Because what happens when you add a fingerprint as part of authentication in a banking app is it validates against the fingerprint that's already there in the on the phone. And if it matches, then it means it's a person who's using the phone whom we have already authenticated using the username, password, and two-factor authentication token. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, what you will experience in your phone, which you probably already have, probably a bit of repetitive information. But if you change your, say for example, you have your phone set up, you have your four fingerprints set up with your four fingers, and now if you want to give your access to your phone to your spouse, and then you add their fingerprint, replace one of the four that you already had, then all of the apps will ask again to revalidate that this is who you say
Yeah,
it is.
yeah. If you add
But,
it after adding the fingerprints, yes.
yeah, yeah. So they will say, oh, the fingerprint information has changed, so you got to re-register and sort of re-establish that okay, the banking app should open with your biometrics. So yeah, that's for additional security. So that's why I think on this front, the security part is actually quite advanced and quite reliable. Obviously, there are ways still, and the malicious people will still look for other ways continuously. But this is I find it. Well, I mean, two-factor authorization is probably the best secured way of protecting your information. But apart from that, a very quick solution. You don't have to press four-digit passwords or longer with your fingerprint or facial recognition. You can have quick access, and while still being quite secured.
Yeah,
So yeah,
because I think the convenience part is what impresses me, because I actually don't remember the password for my laptop now because I keep using my fingerprint.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, these biometric technologies have made our lives a lot easier than before. Not just the aspect of opening your phone quicker or signing into various apps quicker, but also when you are traveling and your passport identification nowadays, with machine readable passports, you're quickly having a fingerprint scan and a photo taken, and automatically you're verified and letting being let enter the country or depart the country, etc. So these are just two ways, but then there are many other ways. It has made our lives easier to be able to identify ourselves quickly to the authorities and to other third-party businesses, etc. So yeah, it is a good positive technology, and it secures us more. So, but again, with any technology, there are vulnerabilities. So it's just a matter of being aware of how
Yeah.
it's being used and where you are giving out information without unsuspectingly, rather. So yeah, so I would encourage the audience to be aware of it, but also keep being in tune with the technology and check out what new biometrics are coming into play and becoming more popular, and it's something that is making our lives easier, and hopefully in future it will keep making our lives easier. And security is such an important, access to information and identification is so important, and it's biometrics is making it possible to attach your information with your biological self, and
Yeah.
that's really useful and will become more and more important in coming decades.
I think rather than carrying a piece of identity, if you just go somewhere and they can verify just with who you are by taking a sample of blood, DNA, fingerprint, retina scan, whatever, facial recognition, then it just makes life easier. And I think that's the reason why biometrics have become now so popular, because of the convenience. We have so many devices, we have so many apps, we have so many things in our lives. We cannot keep remembering passwords for everything. So biometrics are there to help us make our lives easier. Plus, also at the borders, when you're traveling, uh, or anywhere else where there is a high security risk, then yes, biometrics are quite useful.
Absolutely, and to reach to a science fiction level sort of future where things are like going smoothly, and like in like click of no even click of a button happens right now, with even before everything's happening. That could happen if all the related involved party knows who everyone is
Yeah,
in the blink of an eye. And as soon as that can be achieved, for example, you think these new Amazon stores are state of the art. You don't have to, you can just pick up a stuff and leave. But there are something behind it. You have to, before you go to the store, you have to register yourself. You probably have to download an app, and you have to say that this is who I am, this is my payment information, and all of that. So, what if there was, all different companies talking to each other, having the necessary information required to identify each of them? Like, it's not like you just going to need to be identified. You also want to identify which businesses are you're interacting with, and then it could be in your whole life could be that much automated that you go and do, you don't have to physically pay or anywhere, because every business knows who you are, and
yeah.
they can just charge your account directly. So yeah, basically, to if once we have that level of biometric identification, implemented everywhere in say for example in a model city, then you should be able to live a life where you don't have to identify yourself manually or have make any effort to identify yourself. All related authority, it's, to be honest, as I talk about it, it sounds quite dangerous to me. I don't want everyone, all private companies and government, to
But
know who I am every second. But what you can achieve is the convenience of future science fiction level. convenience. You just get up, do, take a taxi or not, or buy whatever. You just pick up whatever you like, and everything is automatically updated in your bank account in the background. So yeah, it could be quite powerful if used, coherently and ethically, I suppose.
No, I think you raise a very important point. Like you go anywhere and you can just pick up stuff, and yeah, things will work. One of the interesting things while you're talking about is China. So China actually uses facial recognition software to identify people who break traffic rules, especially pedestrians. And they take photos of people, and they can shame. They have like a shaming wall or something where they put pictures of people who have broken the traffic rules to let everyone know that okay, these are the people who have broken the rules. So that's one aspect. The I think the other aspect, which is I think quite interesting, is currently we have to carry a form of identity wherever we go, be it a passport, be it a visa, be it a driving license, etc. If everything could be tracked to who we are and how we are or look or say sound, then we actually don't have to carry any form of identity. Just by using a scanner, everyone can see who we are and all the data they can track. So then I don't have to carry my driving license, I don't have to carry my passport, I don't have to carry my visa, I don't have to carry my credit card or debit card. Everything is charged based on who I am.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, to be honest, it is, the China example is ethically quite controversial to
It
me.
is, it is,
I
it
don't know
is. I
whether I
mean,
like it
yeah.
or.
But it's a communist rule, so and that's what that form of government does. I mean, there is. I'm not criticizing the government itself, but what I'm saying is that they use this technology on their citizens, and they are capturing the faces on a regular basis. So your data is actually being captured on a regular basis by Chinese authorities if you ever visit China.
Yeah, that is an important piece of information to be aware of. So yeah, I think this was a good conversation, Amit. I've as I spoke, I kind of opened my eyes as well as learned quite a bit from you. Thank you very much for telling me about all of this. Hopefully, our audience enjoyed this conversation. And if you guys would like to have any feedback on this or any of the other episodes, do reach out to us. Or if you guys want to be, if you want to come to our podcast as a guest, don't. Um, I mean, we definitely do want more sort of audience interaction. So if you guys feel like you would be, if you have a particular expertise that you would like to talk about, tech related, then please reach out to us, and we would love to have a chat with you guys and see where that takes us. So yeah, thank you very much, guys, for listening, and hope to see you guys again next week.
Thank you so much, Renat, for again a good conversation on a very important topic. Thanks, everyone, and see you next week.